Hello and welcome to Fix It, the podcast by the Fix Media, where we unpack media insights and take you behind the scenes of editorial decisions, strategy, and innovation. I'm your host, Anton Protsiuk, senior editor of the Fix Media. Before we dive in, please subscribe, follow, and if you like what you hear, support us at thefix.media. Today we will be talking about leadership in the media industry, and I am delighted to be joined by Raju Narisetti, a veteran media executive. His career in the news industry has spanned from his days as print reporter to managing digital transformation for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post to launching a major newsroom of his own. And today he leads global publishing at McKinsey. He is steering a big team in a large multinational consultancy. Raju has worked at the intersection of journalism, business strategy, and digital transformation, and he's also deeply engaged in questions of leadership and management, how to build teams, how to make decisions, and how to help people grow. So that's what we will be talking about today. Raju, welcome to the Fixed podcast.
Thank you, Anton. Delighted to be here.
So let's start with your background. You've had this fascinating career from journalism to newsroom leadership to managing the publication output of one of the world's biggest consultancies. Can you just give us a brief overview of your journey and what drew you to your current role at McKinsey?
Absolutely. I've spent about 35 years in media and content. I was born and grew up in Hyderabad, a city in South India, and then ended up coming to the US to study journalism at Indiana University, where I got my master's. And while doing that, was a summer intern at the Wall Street Journal that year, and then ended up working at the Wall Street Journal for about 14 years as a reporter, and then as an editor, and eventually editor of Wall Street Journal Europe and deputy managing editor for the global Wall Street Journal. And in 2006, quit that to go launch a newspaper in India called Mint, which is now India's, I think, second largest news brand in business journalism. And then, having done that for a large media company in India, went back to the US as the first outside managing editor that was hired by the Washington Post. My primary role was to combine what were then very separate print and online newsrooms and news organizations. I did that. This was pre Bezos buying the Washington Post. And then eventually went back to the Wall Street Journal, initially as a head of digital for the paper, and then moved to News Corp as a senior vice president of strategy, um, helping figure out kind of the growth and business of News Corp. And then spent a few years being CEO of a digital company called the Gizmodo Media Group, which was a combination of websites, the old Gawker websites like Gizmodo, and then Lifehacker, and then we bought the Onion and the Root and created a digital company for a big Spanish TV company called Univision. And then ended up teaching business journalism at Columbia Journalism School in New York. And for the last 6 years, I've been leader and head of publishing at McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, but has actually been in publishing for about 61 years now. McKinsey invented the idea of thought leadership, which is publishing by non news companies, if you will, or non publishing companies. I lead a team of people. We publish almost entirely business content, nothing to do with news anymore or journalism, but writing about global business issues for a very large global business audience. So that's what I do now.
And can you give us a sense of McKinsey's publishing engine? What products do you oversee and how many people read them, listen to them?
We publish 1,000 articles a year, which might not seem like a lot. We publish them on McKinsey.com primarily. They're free to read. We also have about 50 different newsletters and email alerts that people can subscribe to. We have several podcasts, a little bit of video. We publish a quarterly flagship publication called the McKinsey Quarterly, which has again been around for about almost 62 years now. Our audience is very global, aimed at a business audience that's comfortable in English. Uh, we get audiences from close to 150 different countries. The US is the single largest audience market, followed by UK, India, Germany, Australia, and Canada. And almost everything we write is about what we call as insights to impact. By that, I mean, look, anybody with a LinkedIn account can claim to be a thought leader these days. So, what we are trying to do is to kind of help our business audiences apply what we publish and write about in trying to solve any problems that they're having at their end. The hope is that they will read something and say, look, McKinsey has some interesting ideas. Let me engage them further in actually solving the business problem. So that's the audience we write about, and those are the topics we write about.
That's really interesting. And now let's dive into leadership. So you've managed teams across very different environments. You've managed newsrooms. You now manage a large team in a multinational non-news company. What would you say is your overall core leadership philosophy? What principles guide how you approach managing people and managing teams?
Yeah, Anton, I mean, having now been running teams or newsrooms or large organizations for probably about 20 years now, I think your leadership philosophy and approaches and operating model constantly evolves. And if you were to ask me today, I think there are two ways to think about it. One is like, what is the operating model for the teams or the people you're responsible for? And then, of course, your own personal operating model. I think my team is used to hearing me talk about our role as a group is to create meaningful differentiation and not better sameness. And by that, I mean that our role is to innovate, create new products to meet the needs of the audiences that we have defined, but do it in a way that is meaningful to that audience. It's differentiated, not exactly kind of just trying to do more of the same or even better of the same. So this philosophy of like meaningful differentiation is something that I really uh, try to practice and get my teams to think about in our everyday work. And then when it comes to my own personal leadership operating model, I think there are two or three, I would say, principles that I've come to follow. One is that there is a way to lead by building consensus, and there's a way to use consensus as an excuse not to lead. So I think you have to kind of, all leaders, I believe, must be prepared to be led. So you have to be humble enough to say that there are things I know very well, but at the same time, there are lots of things I don't know very well. And if you are going to be an effective leader, you can't feel or you can't be the smartest person in the team. So you should surround yourself with people who are smarter in many different ways. And the best practices come out of that interaction with them. And then, just again, from a personal point of view, I have believed that you can't blow an uncertain trumpet. By that I mean you have to be reasonably confident of your hypothesis and what you want to do, but constantly assess that with evidence and with feedback to make sure that you're not kind of set in your ways and are willing to be open to consider other ways of doing what you're doing.
The success audience is a lot of media managers, including some younger media managers. And one challenge many of managers face is finding this right balance between being hands-on and maintaining strategic oversight, so to speak. How do you think about this tension between micromanagement and keeping the bigger picture in view?
I think being aware that you're micromanaging um, is, I think, half of the battle, because I think a lot of times leaders don't tend to realize that they are doing that. In my case, I tend to be short term impatient with day to day tasks, but long term patient with results. What that does is it at least helps me kind of step in when I feel like we are not executing on the direction of travel. But more often than not, I'm, because of this realization that you need to be patient with results, I think it helps me step back and give the team the room to kind of deliver. I think one of the one of the challenges of leadership is that I think a lot of people assume that everybody needs to be on the same place or in the same starting line to move forward collectively as a team. My philosophy on that is slightly different, in the sense that I think that in a team or in an organization, people will be at different stages, and you can spend a lot of time trying to get them all to the same starting line. Or you can say that as long as we are all in agreement on where we are trying to go, it's okay for different groups to, or different people to be on different parts of that journey. We can still move collectively forward in the same direction. So that also allows me to kind of not try to get too micro about, like, again, pushing everybody in the same, at the same pace and the same level, and not be too worried about, like, the pace at which some people might move versus the others, as long as it's clear that we're all agreed on the direction of travel and where we're trying to get to. I tend to kind of compare this to driving with looking in the rear view mirror and kind of being happy about how far you have come, or being unhappy about how far you've come. I think as a leader, that's when you tend to be very micro, because you look back and say, God, we need to do more. But I think if you're driving the team or driving the organization, looking ahead to how far we need to go collectively, I think you tend to be kind of a lot more calm about it, give yourself more grace. And so that's kind of my approach to trying to balance. And I must say that I don't succeed all the time. There are times when you feel like you're too in the weeds, and there are times, but you also don't want to be a leader who doesn't roll up his sleeves and be with the team and only gives, like, this 30,000 feet direction. I think that's important, but that can't be the only way you lead.
Like in the episode, sounds like we're a great match, and we couldn't be happier. If you'd like to strengthen our bond, support us by donating or joining our membership program. That's it. No more interruptions. Back to the episode.
One of the core tenets, one of the core parts of leadership is decision making. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about, is there a particular framework or a mental model you rely on when making major decisions? Maybe you could give an example of a major decision you had to make as a leader, and then how have you arrived at this decision?
First, some, like, general principles, right? I think there are few things that I have internalized. One is that experiments fail, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't call them experiments. So I think it's important to kind of give that sense of security and make decisions on some experiments with the understanding that things could fail. I also believe that, you can't fail from the floor. I mean, by that I mean, if you're starting something new, you can't fully fail, because even if that particular project doesn't succeed, you would have learned a lot. That's what I mean by saying you can't fail from the floor. And then I think you have to have another philosophy, which is that success does not lie in like sticking to things. It lies in picking the right things to stick to and then reducing or eliminating the rest, right? So I think having those kind of like bit of an operating model helps as well. Look, I think every day as leaders, you tend to make decisions. Sometimes they're forced on you by the macro environments, and sometimes you see something around the corner and want to react to it in advance. Right now, like all publishing operations, we are dealing with the sudden impact of Gen AI and what it's doing to our search audiences. So you could sit there and continue to tweak your SEO and do that to kind of preserve the audience. But I'd like to think of it as putting on thicker gloves to catch falling knives. Eventually, the knives will cut through the gloves, right? Or you could say, can we get ahead of this? So, one of the big decisions we had to make last year was what if we create a public facing chatbot LLM Gen AI thing and we called it Ask McKinsey and put it on our website? And so people can, instead of starting out with Google and asking queries there and then maybe coming to us or maybe not coming to us, for those who are coming to our website, what if we give them the capabilities of an LLM chatbot so that they can ask the queries they're asking and get the responses and hopefully deepen the engagement and keep them longer with us? But the reality is that we also operate in a very real and perceived risk environment. I call it the Wikipedia problem, where somebody will go vandalize a Wikipedia page, take a photo of it, and then publish that photo saying, look, Wikipedia is terrible, right? The reality is that somebody did it maliciously. So for a firm like ours, we were very concerned about what if they ask us a question that was, something we couldn't answer or something that's like, very deliberately mischievous, and then say that, look, McKinsey is like messing up, right? So I think we have to really think through the risk elements of that. But I could spend a lot of time being frozen by risk, or I could say I'm putting in enough guardrails, but I still want to launch this. And the Ask McKinsey became the first public facing chatbot offering at McKinsey, and it's been up for about this year. And sure, there are occasional answers that don't make everybody happy, but the reality is that it has performed pretty well. It was a pretty big decision. I was putting my team and my neck out there. It required a lot of resources. And so I think that's the kind of decision making where you have to kind of say, do I want to go where I think the future of audiences is going to be? And will we want to take some calculated risks? Or should we just wait for that to play out? I think the news industry has suffered from letting others do things to us. And having learned from that in my time at the news industry, now, if given a choice, if I have the resources, I want to kind of take some of those smart risks and get ahead of it. So that would be an example of like taking a risk. And by the way, not everybody internally agreed with it. Like some people were very worried about like, why are we doing this? Why can't we wait for this technology to get robust? But we also wanted to kind of be the um, first movers, if you will. McKinsey is known for being innovative and creative, and I wanted to kind of leverage some of that for publishing as well.
That's a really interesting case, and you've touched on AI. So let's talk a bit more about it from a bit different point. There is a lot of discussion on how AI will reshape jobs. And from your perspective, how do you see AI impacting careers in journalism and in publishing more broadly? What advice would you give to young professionals on how to future-proof their work lives in the age of AI?
I think, as I was saying, it is easy to blame technology and the shifts in technology for what's happening to us, rather than kind of saying the decision on how we use technology is up to us. I wish I had a crystal ball about what AI might do to jobs, but I suspect in the short term, jobs that are manual, jobs that are repetitive, jobs that can be done at scale, by machines will indeed be replaced by AI. But the way I look at it, and this is what I tell my team, look, AI can generate content, it cannot generate trust. And trust is still the currency of both survival and growth. So then, what are the things that McKinsey Publishing does that gives people trust? Whether it's the quality of our work, whether it's the fact checking, whether it is a simple thing like we have a copy desk that looks at every citation that an author team might present, right? There are examples now of how people are making up citations that don't exist. If you outsource content creation to AI, it's possible that it will hallucinate and that could happen. But if you believe that the role of a copy desk is to also kind of check for these kind of things, these what I would call trust enablers or trust multipliers, then the people on the copy desk, I think, will have a bright future. But if they see their role as simply fact, like spell checking, making sure things are according to style guide, those can be fully automated already, right? So it's a matter of how you think about AI. What do you think of its role? At McKinsey, we believe that AI is a co-pilot, co-pilot with a lowercase c, as in like humans and AI is the best outcome. So I think that's how we are approaching it. I'm also very cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of IP issues that haven't been resolved around video and audio. So currently, we are using it as an enabler to save us some time that we can then shift to higher value added work. But we are not thinking of it, at least anytime soon, as a substitute for human creativity and human contributions. Like I said, if our publishing relies on getting audiences who trust us, I think trust is still a currency of human beings, and that's what we are thinking about. To your question about what does this mean, especially for young people, I think you have to experiment a lot. If you're not using AI and not kind of trying out things, you are going to lose out, right? So I think it's important not to be fearful or Luddites and not to try it. And that's what I tell my team. I said, like, look, as an organization, we are giving you a lot of AI tools. You should embrace it because if you think your job is going to be replaced, wouldn't you want to learn a lot of AI that the company is paying for or subsidizing and improve your own skill sets in the eventuality you may lose your job? So why kind of not embrace it and learn from it and get better at it? And then the other thing with AI is that it's you should ask it to do things that you are not good at rather than ask it to do things that you're very good at, right? Substitutability should be complementary to what you can do very well versus what you can do very well. And if you bring those two together, your value proposition goes up. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But I do think it's a seminal uh, set of technologies, not dissimilar to when how the World Wide Web changed journalism. Mobile phones turned journalism into a two-way thing. So I think we are at the cusp of something that's going to be very ubiquitous and revolutionary in that sense. So there's no point in trying to fight it.
One thing I've noticed is that there are a lot of people, a lot of journalists who consider you a mentor. You've mentored quite a lot of leaders throughout your career. So I wanted to ask about your approach to mentoring and developing people. Are there any specific frameworks or methods that you use to help people grow into leadership roles?
Yeah, a few things, Anton. In the beginning of my managerial career, I would get very upset when somebody left my team and left my organization to another job, right? You would feel like a very personal sense of loss. But over time, I've come to believe that the true value of a manager or a leader is in how well you have developed your people so they can go make contributions ideally with you, but elsewhere as well. So the moment you think about your contributions at that level, then it becomes very easy to think about what your contribution is. It's not necessarily to that particular organization or particular team. And the second thing is really around I'm a strong believer in succession planning. I start doing that on day one of a new job because I believe that, Jonas Salk um, had this amazing quote in which he asks, "Are we being good ancestors?" I really believe that I owe it to my organization to be a good ancestor. And by that, I mean when I'm ready to leave or when the organization is ready for me to move on, I should have leave behind a group in which to replace me, they don't need to go outside. I should like leave enough succession planning. I should train enough people. And I think that's been something that I have like really consciously done. And then there are operating models, right? I think if you are transparent, I think a lot of people appreciate that. Um, at McKinsey, we have in my team we have a monthly all hands meeting where I talk about what I know about the state of the firm, what I know about the environment. We do a every 6 weeks we do a what's called a experience survey. We ask our entire team to kind of rate ourselves on how we're doing. It's also some free text. People can say how they're feeling. And we share the entire report back at the next publishing meeting. So there's nothing, sometimes people are very critical of some things, but we put all of the comments up there. It's a chance for us to see what people are feeling like and discuss that. Um, and I think if you focus on to my point about if you focus on this idea that our role is to create meaningful differentiation, I'm always pushing people to do more and not resting on laurels. But I think they also see that it is to try to kind of do better new things rather than kind of stick with the old stuff. And I think it's both motivating, even though sometimes it might feel like he's always asking us to do something different and better the next time around, right? But I think people, and then accessibility. When I became my first time I became a CEO, um, I used to feel like I'm really not getting anything done. And the reason I used to feel that is I make lists. I make a list of things I want to do. And when I became a CEO, I would like not be able to strike off anything on that list by the end of the day. So I was getting really upset about I'm really failing. And I asked a mentor at that time, and he said, "Why is it that you're not getting anything off your list?" And I said, "That's because I have an open door policy. People are coming in all day with some problem, and we are solving for that problem. And at the end of the day, things that I have put on my list are not getting done." And he said, "But Raju, that is your job, meaning that people are your job. And everything else is a bonus. If you can scratch off a couple of other things you had on your list, that's great. But if you're dealing with all of the things that people are bringing up to you as a leader, that is the job." So now I really practice it. My team will tell you that it is very rare that they don't hear back on an email they send me within literally 5 minutes. Every Friday, I have open office hours. It's virtual, but anybody can drop in. So I'm hugely accessible via Slack, via email, a little less via getting on the phone with me because my schedules can be pretty busy. But my entire team will tell you that literally every five, if they write to me, they will hear back literally in less than 5 minutes. And I've really kind of practiced that, being available and being responsive to it. So end of the day, as a manager, you may not do a bunch of things that you did as an individual contributor, but your job is your people.
That's really interesting, and that ties into another question I wanted to ask about your own productivity practices, right? You are quite open to other people, especially to your team. You're accessible, but at the end of the day, you still have to do some of the things from your to-do list. So, what are some of your own productivity habits that help you stay on top of what you need to do?
I like to believe I'm a good multitasker. I think which is probably not true, but at least I like to believe it. So I tend to be able to juggle a few things at the same time. And I confess, Anton, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because if my hands and my eyes are free, I am constantly missing what's happening in the podcast, and I'm constantly rewinding. Uh, so I don't know if I'm very good at multitasking, but I'd like to think I am. So as a result, I think I tend to be able to do things less sequentially than perhaps some other leaders. I also have a very disciplined. I tend to get up very very early in the morning, and it's something that I've done for a very long time. It gives me 2 to 3 hours of Raju time, and I can get a lot of um, thinking, a lot of creativity, a lot of my own reading done. As a result, during the rest of the day, I feel like I'm in the service of others. So I'm not like trying to shortchange me because I've done that already very early in the morning. I'm a big believer in zero inbox. By the way, if I open an email, I deal with it. I never kind of put it back down without dealing with it. So that has also helped me kind of stay on top of things. Um, it comes, like I said, I may not be as great a multitasker as I think that I am, but people are kind of used to being multitask, and they know that it's not that I'm ignoring them. If I'm in the middle of the meeting and I'm also like listening but also doing some typing at the same time, I'm very open about telling people that. uh, no major revelatory hacks, I must say. Like all leaders, I also struggle to get the balance between work and life, but I've come to recognize that maybe there's never going to be a balance. Maybe it's just a flow. Sometimes the flow is very heavy towards work and sometimes it's not. And rather than kind of wanting it to be in perfect balance, I'm okay if it's not in equilibrium, as long as I realize it's a flow and it's a bit of a pendulum and it will shift back and forth.
So, final question: are there any books or overall resources on leadership that you can recommend to our listeners who would like to develop their leadership skills? I know that you are publishing a lot on this topic at McKinsey, so whether that's the output and the work of your team or anything else, we would really appreciate a couple of recommendations.
Yeah, I'm a little biased because as you noted, I do publish. I'm the publisher, so I do help McKinsey authors publish books. We have a really, and you should read this too, Anton. And I'm not saying it just because I'm trying to get you to get one of our books, but we're in October. Simon and Schuster is publishing a book from us called "A CEO for All Seasons: Mastering the Cycles of Leadership." By all seasons, we mean that if you look at the life cycle of a CEO, um, it's there's a beginning, there's a preparation for the beginning, there's a beginning, there's early years, there's a middle, and there's a clear end. How do you, as a leader, master these cycles of leadership is something that my colleagues at McKinsey have thought about a lot. And I'm really excited. It's a very slim book, it's probably a couple of 100 pages. But I think it's a good roadmap for individuals, and it's called A CEO for All Seasons. It comes out in early October. But I must say that I actually don't read a lot of books on leadership. I actually find if I have time to read books outside my job, that is, I tend to read a lot of poetry. I find poetry as a good way for me to be creative and get outside my head, if you will, in terms of work issues. So I would recommend a little bit of poetry, a little bit of the McKinsey leadership book that I talked about called The CEO for All Seasons. And then if somebody is thinking a little bit more philosophical, um, Atul Gawande, who's a physician but is an author, wrote an amazing book called Being Mortal, which is about how do you think about life and what is kind of living life versus just simply thinking about prolonging life. I think it's applicable to a lot of situations. And as you get older and as you kind of have done a lot of things in life, I think it's important to kind of think about that, not in a sorrowful life is going to end kind of way, but in how do you kind of take advantage of the years you have and what you do with.
That's really interesting. I would love to read all of the books that you mentioned. Raju, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your insights with the Fixes audience. I think people will get a lot of value from this conversation. And that's all for today. Thank you for being with us. Follow The Fix, subscribe to the Fixed podcast, and if you want to help us grow, please head over to thefix.media and join our membership family.